The film began by explaining that in a future where the world was full of hope and conflict, humanity was exploring space to find intelligent life beyond Earth. Then we were shown a man called Major Roy McBride, who was undergoing a psychiatric test as he was about to go on duty. Roy was a hard worker, totally dedicated to his work. Even his wife, Eve, left him because she was so infatuated with his profession as an astronaut. One day, there was an accident at the space antenna where Roy was on duty. An electromagnetic wave caused an electrical surge, and an explosion threatened to destabilize human civilization. The astronauts started falling, and some of them died. The television media reported the accident, and it turned out that the wave had damaged space antennas and electrical circuits all over the world. No one knew what had caused the surge, but it definitely came from space, and scientists fear it could happen again. As one of the surviving astronauts, Roy was asked to meet with Spacecom officials for questioning. But this was all just a cover, as Roy's real purpose in being summoned was to discuss highly confidential matters. 11 days ago, Spacecom managed to capture a spectrogram from Neptune. This cosmic explosion sent energy particles towards Earth. That's what caused the catastrophic energy surge around the world, specifically the accident that almost killed Roy. They then discussed the Lima project, which was led by Clifford McBride, Roy's father, 29 years ago. Lima was a project of the first human expedition to the outer part of the solar system, which suddenly disappeared after 16 years. Surprisingly, the officials said they believed Clifford was alive and around Neptune. This was based on the antimatter reaction caused by the resort and the power of Lima project. They believed there was a serious problem with the project ship that created the wave. At first, Spacecom tried to find out where the wave was coming from and sent drones to Neptune. Roy was then given a secret mission to contact his father using a laser transmitter on Mars. If the wave continued to hit Earth, it would not be long before humanity was wiped out. Colonel Pruitt, one of Clifford's colleagues, would be Roy's spokesman in carrying out the mission. And because of the top-secret nature of the mission, Spacecom would send Roy to the moon commercially to avoid attracting too much media attention. Will you go with Roy? A question that seemed to give Roy a choice when he carried on his shoulders his father's title as a pioneer and hero who sacrificed everything in the search for intelligent life. Roy's last memory was a message containing footage of Clifford traveling from Jupiter to Neptune. The man seemed so enthusiastic about Lima project because he felt the presence of God close to him. Roy was unconvinced that Clifford was still alive because he could not determine why his father had broken off contact with mission control. However, according to Pruitt, from his 31 years of experience as an astronaut, space expeditions could be a means of escape. So Clifford could have been hiding from everyone all this time, and Pruitt hoped that Roy would be ready to accept it once he knew the truth. On the eve of his departure for the moon, Roy tried to contact Eve to express his feelings, but he could not. Roy spent his last night on Earth thinking of his wife. After landing at a lunar station, they would go to the launch site of the Cepheid ship, which was in a dangerous zone, so Roy and Pruitt would be escorted by the military from Spacecom. Roy was still confused by Spacecom's aim to link the surge with his father's whereabouts. It made no sense for Spacecom to doubt Clifford, a hero who had dedicated his life to the program. Sometime later, according to the project briefing, Spacecom used the rover to escort members of the military to the launch site in a dangerous area. En route to the Spacecom base on the moon's far side, a band of scavenger pirates ambushed Roy and Pruitt, who were secretly paid by several countries to mark their mining zones. Typically, the pirates would seize rover vehicles or other sophisticated tools. Lieutenant Levant, who was leading the escort, immediately contacted the command center. Unfortunately, however, there was a breakdown in communications, so they had to wait until they reached the base. A firefight between Levant's troops and the pirates resulted in the destruction of 2 rover escorts. Roy's military experience came in handy in this situation. Roy's rover was hit, but the man managed to use it to escape into a dark zone. Communication was established with the command center and 2 drones were dispatched to destroy the pirates. Unfortunately, by the time he reached the base, Pruitt's heartbeat had become irregular. Pruitt explained that Spacecom was hiding something behind this secret mission because they could not trust Roy. After launching with Cepheid, Roy was relieved that Pruitt had been treated by medics. He then asked permission to repair his astronaut costume, which had been shot up on the moon. As he examined the contents of the drive Colonel Pruitt had given him, he was surprised to learn that Spacecom had picked up a possible distress signal from the Lino project crew, reporting that Commander Clifford had deliberately cut off all external communications. It was thought that Clifford was suffering from mental problems. If all this is true, and Roy's touch was unsuccessful, then they must kill Clifford with great force to stop the wave. Roy wonders what exactly his father found on Neptune to make his soul, even though his father was one of the most accomplished astronauts. He once promised to take Roy into his crew one day. Suddenly, the Cepheus slowed down to receive an emergency signal from the Vesta spacecraft. At first, Roy complained that this might interfere with his secret mission. However, Captain Tanner could not ignore the distress signal as it was strictly forbidden unless Roy wanted to explain the personal mission and conditions. Roy finally tried to understand and decided to persuade Lieutenant Stanford, who looked frightened, to accompany Tanner to inspect the Vesta ship. On arrival, Roy and Tanner split up to look for the ship's crew, which was sent to number 26. Strangely, however, they found no one. He saw something strange with Tanner, even though he tried to approach him. Shockingly, a laboratory baboon, a Vesta research animal, attacked Tanner's face. Tanner was mauled to death. Roy immediately shot the animal with his gun and got Tanner out of there. Then another primate appeared and tried to attack Roy, so he locked the corridor door and increased the air pressure to kill the animal. The death of Captain Tanner devastated the entire crew, but the expedition must continue. After releasing Tanner's body into the vacuum, the captain's position was filled by Stanford as primary pilot, with Roy as co-pilot. Upon entering Mars orbit, Stanford asked Roy to automatically land Cepheus. Suddenly, the surge disrupted the entire system and the Cepheus became unstable. Seeing Stanford do nothing, Roy was finally forced, for safety's sake, to break the rules and take over the controls manually so that he could land the Cepheus safely. Roy hoped that Stanford would understand his decision and not report it to Spacecom. The Ursa research station was underground, so the surge would not affect systems or power. After passing the inspection, Roy was escorted to the Spacecom room by Ursa director Helen Lantos, who reveals that her parents were Lima Project team members. Roy immediately made contact with Neptune via laser transmission. The man was annoyed at being used by Spacecom, so Roy did not know if he still wanted to see his father or if he wanted to be accepted and believed his father was dead. On the first attempt, Roy spoke to Clifford by text and received no reply. But on the second attempt, when Roy did not use text and expressed his desire to see his father, it seemed that the team had something to hide from Roy because of family relationships. Even his psychiatric test was set up to fail so that Roy wouldn't get a license to fly. Later, Director Helen approached Roy to explain that the Cepheus ship was heading for Neptune with a nuclear bomb. Helen also explained what happened at Lino Project, which killed Helen's parents, and played a recording of Clifford's confession. The man has killed all the crew members who want to rebel by taking over the ship to return to Earth. Roy must face a terrible truth. His father was far more disappointing than he believed. But Roy was just an ordinary man who thought he could bring his father back to Earth and solve the problem. Helen could only help guide him to the launch site, but after that he must find a way to get into Cepheus. Later, Roy arrived at the launch site after crossing the barren plains of Mars. The man immediately rushed to Cepheus through the underground tunnel. Eventually, Roy managed to sneak into Cepheus as the rocket was launched. Once inside, Stanford reported Roy to Spacecom and an order was given to destroy Roy. Deaver, unprepared for the ship's sliding conditions, was killed instantly as his head hit the airtight door. A fight broke out between Roy and Yoshida. Stanford, who was helping, tried to open fire. Unfortunately, the shot hit a gas cylinder, contaminating the oxygen and killing Yoshida and Stanford. Roy reported his intentions and the fate of the 3 fallen crew members to the control center. The flight record would tell, and history will decide. The man would continue his mission to Neptune and destroy the entire Lima project with the nuke he carried. Eventually, Roy turned off all communications until he approached Lima Station, so as not to be detected. During the voyage, Roy opened a video message sent by Eve in the form of a recording of her complaints about Roy and his work, which made Eve feel increasingly lonely until she finally left Roy. During the journey to Neptune, a solitary Roy reflected on his relationship with his father and with his estranged wife, Eve. Roy admitted that he was experiencing weightlessness and the length of the journey was beginning to affect him physically and mentally. He was tired of the solitude, which he had previously enjoyed. A few weeks later, Roy finally arrived at Neptune. It was reported that the Lima station had experienced a drop in orbit, changing its coordinates. So Roy had to use a capsule to orbit the rings of Neptune, with Cepheus on autopilot. Roy finally arrives at the station and plants the nuclear bomb before encountering Clifford, the sole survivor of the Lima project. The man was very old and visually impaired. Nevertheless, he tried to carry out his mission, stopping the surge that continued to occur. According to his explanation, the last few crew members tried to escape by sabotaging the ship, causing a leak. Then a series of arguments and fights led to disaster. Although Clifford had left Roy with his mother, Roy still loved his father and was determined to bring him back to Earth. After preparing and activating the explosives, Roy took Clifford with him to return to Cepheus. Suddenly, Clifford used his propulsion and slipped in the opposite direction, attracting Roy. As Clifford kept begging to be left behind, Roy was finally forced to let his father float into the void. Roy was angry and sad that his struggle had failed to bring his father back to Earth. Then the sunlight woke him up, and finally Roy regained his enthusiasm to launch Cepheus. After finally passing through Neptune's ring, Roy arrived at Cepheus with all the data from Lima Project. He reported the station's condition. He would destroy it to prevent the sky from reaching the Earth. Roy would also use a nuclear explosion as his main propulsion. Shortly after Roy launched his plane, the countdown was successful. A powerful explosion pushed Roy's ship so fast that it almost destroyed it. The data retrieved from the Lima Project base suggested that humans are the only intelligent life in the galaxy, but also contained a treasure trove of information on exoplanets, planetary systems, and other celestial bodies in the Milky Way that could potentially aid scientific and human colonization efforts. A few months later, Roy finally manages to land safely on Earth. He smiled with relief when he saw a helping hand from one of the rescue workers. The man was quarantined for a few days, and after a full recovery, Roy returned to undergo psychiatric tests, which he now feels better about than before. In the end, Roy accepted that humans were the only intelligence in the universe until now. He also planned to start a new life with Eve, to love each other and share the burdens of life. So, what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below, and if you liked the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you in the next video.